So Apple has reportedly stopped production of its Vision Pro headsets. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're discontinuing them. It's not necessarily a dead product, but it's definitely a reflection of the poor sales performance that the Vision Pro has had in the past year since it was launched. So if you don't know or don't know a lot about this, so this is the Apple Vision Pro. These are mixed reality headsets, and the idea is that it provides full integration, right, between physical and digital elements. So let me give you a contrast. So virtual reality, right, at least the way it is marketed, completely obscures your vision, right? It's not like you can still see the world through it. It's purely a device that shows you like a VR video or a video game or whatever it is. Contrast that on the other end of the spectrum with augmented reality. So this is something like Pokemon Go or Snapchat filters. This is stuff being digitally superimposed onto real world visuals, right? So mixed reality is kind of in the middle, right, where it's a little bit more involved than just digitally putting stuff on top of a visual of the real world, but the whole idea is it's a lot more integrated, right? So the tech explanation videos and product demos show people working on their computers, and they might have their computer in front of them, but then they have and they can see their computer because it's also clear when it needs to be, but then there also will be floating digital screens above their physical screen, right? If you're looking through the goggles, right? This released about a year ago in February of 2024, and it cost $3,500. And let me say that again. It cost $3,500. That's the cost of, for me, like a month, almost 2 months rent, for me and my fiance, Viviana. Some have said that's like the price of maybe an old used car. This is astronomically expensive, especially considering not just expensive in a vacuum, but even within the realm of headsets like this, whether it be VR or AR or now I guess MR, right? A lot of acronyms here. Even within that world, it was expensive, because I think the Oculus Quest, which is like Facebook's, Meta's VR headset, I think it's like $500 or something. This is well above any competition, right? And based off the response, it didn't really justify that price point. It had a very mixed response. The general consensus seems to be that it was very technologically impressive, but not worth the price. It was not this life-changing device that, the people who used it went, it's changed the way I think about and engage with the world, right? The way a smartphone would. And inevitably sales slowed down, right? Because eventually everyone who wanted to buy one, and then the subset of those people those who could afford to, had bought one, right? It's not a device you're going to buy 8 of, right? Unless you have a big family, you want to buy one for the whole family, right? So because of this, there's this huge backlog of unsold devices. So ultimately, I think Apple went, we're going to stop making more until we sell these other ones. So again, it's not dead, but it's this is definitely a huge stumbling block. So why did this fail, right? I kind of have danced around it, but let me put it more explicitly here. There's just very little interest in headsets like this of any kind, whether it be VR, AR, mixed reality. Consumers just don't seem to want it, and it feels like these kinds of products, at least the way it was crystallized in the Apple Vision Pro, it feels like a solution in search of a problem. Like, it's a really cool technology, but why would I need it? Is it really going to improve my life in any measurable way? It's cumbersome to wear, especially one of these that it's quite heavy. So you need to have good, neck support. You can't skip neck day, I guess. And again, it offers an interesting novelty, but it failed and headsets like it have failed to provide the killer app, right? Like, what is like the thing that you go, I need to buy the Vision Pro just for that, and then I get all the other stuff as well, but I need it for this. It doesn't really have anything like that, and it doesn't really enhance. All it really does is slightly enhance things that you can already do. It doesn't really enhance them in any meaningful way. So, you can watch a movie, right? You can, have, like I described before, like extra screens, like, fake screens for productivity, right? But again, you can achieve like, do I really need to, oh man, I can't stand watching movies on my TV anymore. I just want to put on my Vision Pro, which simulates a screen that is the same proportion of my field of vision as a TV would be, but now I have to wear this giant thing on my face, and I can't engage with other people and watch the movie together unless we're both wearing it, but we also have these giant things on our faces, right? So it just was not really a good cost proposition for people. And again, the price is way too expensive. I've heard, this is a really random connection here, but I did a video last summer about Jenny Nicholson's video about the Star Wars hotel, right? And one of the things she talked about was, this idea of like, is something worth are certain things worth it, right? That phrase, worth it. And she argues that, sometimes things aren't worth it even if you can afford it. Like, it's not about if you can afford it. Like, is it worth the money you're actually paying? And I think even if you had the money, it just didn't seem like it was worth it. Again, it was, other competitors are like in the 3-digit range of price. And it fundamentally misunderstood the way consumer electronics works because, and maybe I'm being a little condescending, like I'm not an expert in, consumer electronics, but look at game consoles as a point of comparison, right? The business model for video game consoles like a PlayStation or the Nintendo Switch has typically been to sell it at a loss. So even though the PS5 is super expensive, technically every PlayStation 5 sold, Sony's losing money. So you go, well, why would they do that? Well, the idea is to get you to buy in to the ecosystem, and then they charge you $70 for a game, which of course the games themselves have production budgets that need to be recouped. But the physical production of the discs is very, very cheap, right? Especially if it's a digital purchase, there's really no cost for the distributor, right? Except for maybe just the coding of it, right? So you sell the console for a loss, but you sell the software at this huge markup. And everything kind of evens out in the end. Well, better than evens out. Eventually you make a profit, because if it evened out, the profit would be zero and these companies would go out of business, right? But with this, what they needed to do was sell it for way less, like even $1,000, right? I could see this doing much better if it was $999.99, right? Like I could see people like a cool grand. But it just didn't. I think they knew they didn't have the software to support it, or the experiences to support it, that they could make their money back later. So they were like, we're just gonna charge as much as we can now. Though all of these things are, again, not unique to Apple Vision, the Apple Vision Pro, right? This is something that has plagued VR as a technology for the past decade, if not longer. It's been one of those things that it's like, oh, it's about to become really big, and then it just never does. Though if anyone could pull it off, it seemed like Apple would be the one to do it, right? Because Apple is such an incredible brand. They have a history of what I heard someone describe as being the second mouse. They're really good at being the second mouse. So, like in a maze, like, they're all looking for the cheese. What Apple does is when there's like a new technological innovation or a new kind of product taking the world by storm, or not taking the world by storm, but has the potential to take the world by storm, they let other companies do the trial and error of design ideas and what consumers actually want, whatever. And then once things have kind of solidified around a certain kind of design principle, then Apple comes in and does that, but better, right? Apple the iPod is probably the most successful MP3 player or music player. It was certainly not the first. There had been MP3 players for years. Smartphones, right? So Apple was not the first smartphone. The iPhone was not the first smartphone. So Apple's success strategy, at least starting with like handheld personal electronics, starting with like the iPod. I don't know enough about the history of Apple when it comes to like their computers and whatnot, but I'm sure it's a similar situation there. You have a brand that does this, but again, because of how strong the brand is and people trust Apple, right? Implicitly. So consumers are willing to take the plunge with new technologies that they don't quite understand because it's Apple, right? You had people so not only was the iPhone better than every smartphone that had come before, but even if it was just as good, people were more willing to get an iPhone than any other prior smartphone because it was Apple, right? So it makes you wonder, if Apple can't even get this right, then the whole thing might be a I don't want to call it a waste of time, but just a garden that is not going to grow at least the way you want it to, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm really into artistic, the way artistic ambition and mediums intersect with technology. And I've been wondering, like, is there a use case for this? And I think that companies should be making headsets like these, but they need to be much more specialized. What they're doing now is trying to make the iPhone, again, something that is for general use, for general consumers, and it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It has multiple different kinds of functions, and no one person's experience with the iPhone is the same. Different apps, different settings if you really want to get even granular, right? What they need to do, what companies need to do is make something the opposite of that. They need to make something that's specialized, right? So, for example, I could see something like this doing really well and you're already seeing this being used, but I don't know if there's specific devices for this exactly, but like for architecture and design. Like, imagine if you're an architect and you're working with a client, and you guys are talking about something in the blueprint. Imagine if you'd be able to go, you know what? Let's take it to the virtual space. And then you both put on, that'd be the catchphrase. Let's take it to the virtual space. And you both put on your headsets, and then you could be in a 3D rendering of what this is going to be, so you can get a sense of like, oh, should this wall be here or not? Like, instead of trying to imagine it, you could see it, right? And you could have special tools and hand controls for certain things related to design, right? Another idea would be like medical scenarios. So like, maybe not during a surgery, but maybe some kind of a physical evaluation. The doctor could put it on and be able to superimpose graphics or effects onto people, and it can, I'm not a medical person, so I don't know what that actually would look like or what it would be like, but that's another example of something that would be a lot more specialized, so that you can justify the cost, because then you're not selling to consumers, you're selling to businesses. A business might be more willing to pay for a $3,500 headset. You could probably charge even more, and they would be willing to do it, because that would be a very actualable, if that's even a word, manifested value. And again, we were joking, but again, this idea of certain kinds of jobs that do require multiple screens. Most of the time, it's probably just easier just to have physical multiple screens, but certain kinds of jobs, it might be useful to have visible screens or visible boxes of display, but the ones that you can easily start like moving around really quickly. Like, I don't know, maybe stock trading or coding, I don't know, but it feels like the opportunity here is to make something for a very specific audience, but these companies have no interest in doing that because they want to try to Apple wants everybody to have an Apple Vision Pro, but I guess they hadn't taken a look at unemployment numbers lately, in that maybe most people maybe the average person can't afford, or even if they can afford, they can't justify a $3,500 purchase for something like this. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.